And before we start the video, I just want to let you know a little bit more about Eric. They're a children's bowel and bladder charity. We've been working with them for a number of years, and as part of this relationship, they provided us with this session on potty training. So I encourage you, after watching the video, to visit their site, explore their resources, and of course, donate. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Charmaine Champ, and I'm a continence, sleep and behaviour consultant, and I specialise in working with all children, including children with an autism, a learning disability and complex needs. And I support families, carers and professionals across the country in being successful with children's wee and poo, so their potty and toilet training, as well as being successful with sleep and behaviour needs. And I'm very excited to be here today representing Eric, as I'm one of Eric's trainers. And I'm here to give you an insight in where to start with being successful with potty and toilet training. So before we sort of get going, I wanted to be able to share a little bit about Eric, so that if you ever need any support in the future, then you know who and where to go to. So Eric's actually a bladder and bowel charity specialising for children. So what Eric actually does is it provides information, support, and it works direct with families, as well as providing training and continence products, and there's lots of information online and within leaflets as well. So one of the things that is available through Eric is the information and support helpline. So if you have ever got any concerns and you're really concerned about your child, then there's a free helpline that is now manned by volunteers within Eric, and that's available between 10 and 2 each day. And even through the lockdown, we were able to keep the helpline support line keep going, which is brilliant. There's also lots of information that I'm going to touch on today, but please feel free to have a look on the website to see what the actual, the other leaflets and things there are. So there's lots of different leaflets that we're going to be discussing today, and these are just a selection of them. So if you do need any information, then this is where you need to go to get the information. Everything's there that you need. Within Eric, we have a website, and there's also a continence pathway. So if you've got a particular need that your children might be experiencing, so if it's sort of like there's daytime wetting, you can click on daytime wetting, and then it tells you step by step what it is that you need to do and how you can help, and also information. So here there's sort of like assessment forms that you can pick out, and monitoring forms as well. So there's lots of information for you that's out there. So as a family, it can be quite isolating when you are experiencing wee or poo difficulties. So that's why we're sort of, within Eric, we've actually put together wee and poo, our cartoon sort of characters, and also we're sort of looking at supporting teens as well. So there's actually blogs and, letting people know that they're not alone with any difficulties that they're experiencing. So the other way that we support families through Eric is we have Health Unlocked. So this is actually an online community, and it's made up of parents and young people. And there's also someone from Eric that steps in and sort of gives overall advice as well. So if there's any support you need there, there's also a new campaign that's just been released called Let's Go Potty. And this is actually on Instagram. And it's an online community where everyone is working with anyone working with young children at any stage of potty training. I can't speak today. Potty training, that's available. So you can just sort of click on that. So if after today you've got information and you think, yes, I'm going to be starting potty training, and then something sort of happens and you're not quite sure, you can click on to the Instagram page, Let's Go Potty, and then you can see, you can get some extra help on there as well. There's also workshops for parents, and I know that Abacus Nursery are going to be linking in with that. So if you would like more information, then please pop along to those workshops as well. That'd be great. So there's also professional training. So I know that there's some carers popping in today to have a look at this showing of the training today. So there's more training that is actually available, and it's about having enough information so you know how you can help your child or the children that you are supporting. So if there's sometimes within continence, and when we're looking at wee and poo, sometimes we just need sort of different products that can help us. So we've actually got our leaflet or booklet here that is available, but this is actually also available online. So if you're not able to get a copy of the actual booklet, you can actually look online, and it's actually the resources that are all available. So it's the shop that we have. So we've got products, we've got things that if you're struggling with bedtime wetting, there's products that you can have on your bed to support, you know, to make sure there's no leakage and things like that. So supporting the mattress. There's actual sort of different types of nappies and products. So there's lots of things, swimwear, lots of different things that are available. So the best thing I'd say to do is to have a look on the ERIC website, and you'll be able to see lots of different information there available for you. So ERIC is actually a charity. So what we try and do is we try and do fundraising to try and raise as much money as possible so that we can help more families. We can make sure that more children have the information and support that they actually need, so they don't need to suffer in silence with any continence issues. So that's why we sort of do fundraising. This was just one of the skydiving situations. So if any of you feel like you want to jump out of a plane, maybe not at the moment, then feel free to sort of, you know, it doesn't have to be jumping out of a plane, but just, you know, feel free to sort of contribute. And I know Abacus Nurseries are very kindly raising some funds for us during this event. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So, looking at being successful with potty and toilet training. So where do we actually start with that? So what we need to look at is we want to look at the foundations. So obviously today we've sort of on quite a tight time schedule today. So today I just wanted to give you the foundations and just know exactly what it is you need to do to start being successful with potty and toilet training. So when we're looking at the foundations, we're looking at healthy poo and healthy wee, and that, hence why we've got our logo here today. So healthy poo and healthy wee, and that is our foundations, and that is where we need to start when we're looking at being successful with potty and toilet training. So the first thing we need to look at is promoting healthy poo. So what we need to look at is, where does our food go? So this is just a picture detailing whereabouts our digestive system is within our body. So if I just come back to myself, hello again. So if I just come back, so where does our poo actually go? So I'd like to introduce you to my cartoon, sorry, it's not stuck here, my cartoon character for the day. And that is Lucy here. So I'm just going to push that across there. So this is Lucy, and she's going to be my child for the day. So when Lucy here eats her food, the food goes down her esophagus and into the stomach. And when it's in the stomach here, it's broken down. So she's chewed her food, it's gone down the esophagus, and it's into the stomach, and it's broken down. Once it goes, it's all broken down, and it's into like a liquidy type mixture. Just make sure you can see that. Liquidy type mixture. It then goes into the small intestine, which is just here. And once it's in the small intestine, all the nutrients, so all the goodness that our body needs is taken out. And that is what makes us healthy and strong. So all the goodness is taken out around our body in the blood. And then we're left with a waste. And a waste goes through here from the small intestine into the large intestine, just here. So once it's here, it's like a soupy type mixture. And what actually happens is that the muscles squeeze that around. And as it's squeezing, water is absorbed into the large bowel. So by the time it gets to here, our watery waste poo then becomes a nice soft poo. So as we said, water is absorbed and the muscles push that poo round. So as it's being pushed, it's pushing that poo round until eventually it reaches the rectum. So how do we actually poo? So once the poo, how do we pass the poo, sorry. So once it actually reaches the rectum, what happens is the muscles in the rectum stretch. And it's that stretching of the muscles that sends a message to the brain that says, you need to go for a poo. And then our Lucy, the child here, will then be able to relax and then pass a poo in the right place. So we now know how we actually poo, but when should we encourage children to sit on the potty or the toilet? So the best time to sit on the potty or the toilet is 20 to 30 minutes after your child has had something to eat. But why? So we said earlier that Lucy here, when she's eaten something, she chews her food and goes down the esophagus into the stomach, where it gets broken down into a liquid type mixture. It then goes into the small intestine. In the small intestine, the blood takes out all the nutrients, so all the goodness, and it gets to a soupy mixture. Water is absorbed and the muscles push that liquid mixture round and becomes a nice soft poo. And that pushes it round until it gets to the rectum. So 20 to 30 minutes after we've eaten is the best time, because that whole process is quickened up when we eat and drink. So the best time to go sit on the potty is after you've eaten. And I know sometimes families sort of say, oh, you know, let's go and wash our hands and go and use the toilet and then we'll go and have lunch. But actually what we should be doing, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but what the best time to do it is after you've eaten. Then that's when you need to be having, you know, you've had your break and your snack. Let's go and sit on the toilet 20 to 30 minutes after you've eaten and drunk something. So we now know how we poo and the best time to sit on the toilet. So this whole process of eating our food and passing a poo can take 24 to 36 hours to go all the way through. So now we know how we actually poo. How do we actually sit on the toilet? So I just wanted to share a picture with you. Just here. So we've looked at where our food actually goes. So how do we actually need to sit on the toilet? So the best position is to have our feet flat on the ground if you're sitting on a potty, or if you're sitting on a toilet, to have them on a footrest or a footstool. And what we're aiming for, as like in my picture here, and hopefully you can see my cursor here, is to have our knees slightly above our hips and then leaning forward. So what we're actually trying to do is we're actually trying to form what's called an anal rectal angle, which is a very funny name, I know, but it's basically getting your body in position. It's leaning forward. So as you can see here, the best thing to do here is either to give your child a book to hold and then you can look over, or if you're on the potty, so this is the potty, you could be sitting just in front of them and showing them a book if they're not able to quite sort of hold it themselves. And then they can actually lean over to actually look at the book. So again, that's a really good thing to do when we're looking at our potty and toilet training. So we now know about how we poo and when to sit on the potty or the toilet. We know how to sit on the potty or the toilet, but what about the poo? So is there actually one type of poo? So when we're actually looking at poo, I'm just going to come back now. Hello again. So I've got a very special treat for you today. I've got a special treat of lots of poos for you, but don't worry, none of these poos are real. This is all craft making. I'm very sad, I'm afraid. I get very excited about poo and wee. It's my job. I can't help it. So I've got in here some craft poos to try and show you the different types of poos that there actually are. So we have our type 1 poo. So we have our type 1. We also have our type 2 poo. You can see that's sort of more clumped together. So we have a type 2. We also have our gift wrapped, and I'm afraid that is gift wrapped today because it was molting, bless it. So this is our gift wrapped poo. And this is just where I've just stuck on different poos. So this is our gift wrap poo. This is type 3. We then have our super poo. So we always have a little cape on him, bless him. So we've got our super poo, and this is our nice soft form type 4 poo. So that's our super poo. We also have a type 5 poo. So there we go, a type 5 poo. Type 6, and don't worry, this is not real, this is just porridge and paint. It's just to show you. So this is our type 6 poo. And because I didn't want it to go everywhere, this is actually meant to represent a liquid type form, which is a type 7. So according to the Bristol stool chart, there's actually 7 different types of poos. I'm just going to show you. So there's actually 7 different types of poos. So if we know that there's actually 7 different types of poos, what's actually normal? So what's actually normal is to pass a poo 3 times a day or 4 times a week. So that just sounds like a crazy thing to say. What does that actually even mean? So what we mean to say is that you can pass a poo once a day. You can pass it every other day. That's fine. You can pass a poo twice a day. You can pass a poo 3 times a day. But what we're saying is that if for any reason there's more than 3 days between eating something and passing a poo, we're saying that the poo has been in here longer, which means, as we said earlier, that the water is absorbed, and which means the poo is staying there longer than it needs to. Equally, if they're actually passing more than 3 times a day, we're actually saying that the process is quickened up, and we're actually saying that could actually be like an overflow. So what are the difficulties that can occur with poo? So the difficulties that can happen, sorry, I'm just going to go back to stop sharing. So we've mentioned earlier that Lucy here eats her food, goes down the esophagus into the stomach, and where it's broken down. It then goes into the small intestines, and all the nutrients are taken away, all the goodness, and we're left with a soupy type mixture. And we said that water is absorbed in the large bowel, and muscles push that liquidy formed poo. And when it gets to around here, it becomes a formed poo. and the muscles push and push until it goes to the rectum. But Lucy here is very busy. She's in the middle of playing. She's got to play with her cars, her trains, her dolls, you know, whatever it is. She's busy. She has not got time to go for a poo. So she ignores it and pretends that she doesn't need to go for a poo. She carries on. She's been eating and drinking still. And then another poo lands here. And Lucy continues to ignore that message. So she continues to eat and drink. Gets to a soupy type mixture. Water is absorbed. And a poo comes round. Now, what we said earlier was that when the poo reaches the rectum, the muscles stretch. And it's that stretching of the muscles that sends a message to Lucy's brain that says she needs to go to the toilet to pass a poo, or that there's a poo there, so she's actually aware of it. But what can actually happen is that if those messages are ignored, there is no more stretching. Lucy has no idea that she has all this poo here. So she now has a build-up of poo, a poo traffic jam. So instead of her rectum looking like this, her rectum will now be enlarged. Hopefully you can still see that. Will be enlarged, and it will now look like this. So she's got a poo traffic jam. She's got all this poo, but because the muscles are no longer stretching and sending a message, she has no idea that all this poo is here. So this is what we call constipation. So constipation isn't just not going to the toilet. So we mentioned earlier, it can be that she doesn't pass a poo, you know, she passes less than 4 times a week. So it can be that she's passing less poos. But it can also mean that she's still passing a poo. So when we're looking, it's almost like we're being detectives about our poo. What's actually happening here? So we could then look, because we know that there are 7 different types of poos. So we can, what type of poo Lucy is actually passing. So she could be passing just one of the little nodules here. So if she passes one of those, that would be a type 1. But she's actually got all this poo still there. She could also pass just like the bottom part of that. So just part of that poo, which would be a type 2. But she's still got all of this poo still in there. Pass a type 2, but she's actually constipated. She could also pass a type 3. Oh, excuse me. So, and that could be either sort of half of that, or some of the children that I work with, it's almost like, it's like a tennis ball sort of size. And as you can see, it's because it's stretched, and that's how big that is actually there. So it's actually like a clump, and it's quite a dry, because we said that the water is being absorbed, and so it's taken all the water out. So it's quite a dry poo. Something else is that rather than just the dry poo, you could also have constipation with overflow. So that's when you could have type 6 poo or your type 7 poos. And what's actually happening there is, we said soupy type mixture. If there's actually a buildup, that could come all the way round, seep round, and then pass out. So you've actually got all this poo there, but you're actually passing a looser poo. So that's actually constipation with overflow. So if a child is actually experiencing this, what sort of difficulties occur with a child? So if you've got all this poo in here, it can actually make you feel really uncomfortable. So it can actually give you a tummy ache, So it can actually make you feel really uncomfortable. It can also make children's tummy extend, but you might not even notice that. Something else that might happen is that because you've got so much poo in here, there's so many more toxins in the body. And this can actually make children quite agitated and affect their behaviour. The other thing it can do is this, I've elongated it so you can actually see, but this is actually pushed up slightly. So the bowel actually pushes against the stomach. So if you've got all of this build-up of poo, it's actually pushing the stomach, and it could mean that children are looked at that they are really picky with their foods, or they haven't got to eat, and that's because of the poo. The other thing that can happen is that the bladder sits just about here in front of the bowel. I'll just push that there, just about here. So as you can see, it's in front of where the rectum and the bowel actually is. So usually bladder is a nice sort of like peach type shape. But when there's so much poo there, instead of being this shape, it's actually a squat. So it would be sort of half the size that it usually is because the poo is pushing on the bladder. And that means the only way you might know that your child is actually constipated is because they are weeing a lot. So it could mean they are constantly going for a wee throughout the day. So if they're actually passing more than the normal amount of wees, which is your 5 to 7 wees a day, then it could be that the bowel is actually pushing on the bladder. So how can you actually make sure that you know what your child is actually doing? So one of the things that you can do is to actually look on the ERIC website, and you can have I'll just see if you can see it there, which is the bladder and bowel assessment chart. So on here, you can just and print one off yourself. That's fine. And what there is there is it's looking at what sort of drinks you're actually having, the types of drink children may be having, whether the nappy or the pull-up or the pad or the pants, whatever you're wearing, is damp, wet or soaking, and all type of poo they're actually passing according to the Bristol stool chart. So it's just trying to get a picture. So what we'd usually say is that for a minimum of 14 days, because we said earlier it can take 24 to 36 hours to go from the mouth to actually passing a poo. So even by just doing that, we can, it needs to sort of be a couple of days. So we just need to get like a pattern. And we said it can be sort of, they don't need to pass a poo sort of for 3 days, and that's fine. So at least if you did that for 14 days, you can get a really clear picture of what's actually happening with your child or the children that you are looking after. So that's the bladder and bowel assessment, which is on the ERIC website. So that'd be a really good idea. So if you're not sure, if you're listening to this today and thinking, I don't actually know what my child is actually passing, don't worry, website, and you can have a print off the bladder and bowel assessment. You can have a little look. The other thing that you can do is one of the that we have is the Eric's Guide to Children's Bowel Problems. So if you're thinking, I'm not quite sure about my child, what they're actually passing, you've actually got the Bristol stool chart in there. So it's actually got the detail. When you're at home, you can sort of make a little note. Yeah, a type 2, and you can just get a pattern to see what's actually happening. So you can have a look at that, which is the Eric's Guide to the Bowel Problems. You've also got another really useful, they're all great, but this is really good, thinking about wee and poo now you've reached the age of 2. So I've given you your hints and tips for potty training, questions that you might need to ask, and sort of a step-by-step of how to actually help your child be successful with their wee and poo. So if we find that we've done the assessment chart, we now know that our child is actually constipated, then what do we do about that? So if a child is actually constipated, you've done the record, you've found that they are definitely passing their type 2s, they're passing type 1s, and then you think, well, that's okay, because they're actually passing our super poo, which is our type 4. And we think, yeah, that's great, that's our nice soft form poo. But the other about is not just the type of poo and how often they go for a poo, but it's the size of the poo. So a lot of the children I work, families are getting involved around maybe they're, being successful with potty training, and we find that there's a lot of wetting and nighttime wetting as well. But when we actually do the assessment, and I do the comprehensive assessment with the families, we actually find that activated, and like we said earlier, is the fact that the poo is pushing on the bladder. And how we know that is because of the size of the poo. We said earlier that it could be part of this, but sometimes, maybe once a week or once every other week, your child may pass a really large poo. Now, some of the children I've worked with, they've actually been able to pass the poo, and it either fills the entire contents of the potty, or it goes down the U-bend of the toilet and is like 2 to 3 inches above the water level. It takes about 4 or 5 flushes to pass. I would say that was a very large poo. So what's actually happening there is that it's the entire contents here, or part of the contents of the large bowel that they're passing. So they're actually constipated. So if a child is passing a large poo, the only way that that large poo can be there is if they are constipated, because there's a build-up. So normal pattern, said, is just to pass one poo at a time. But if there's a really large poo, then it's a build-up of poo that we're actually saying. So, oops, just moving these poos around. So, we've just been discussing constipation. We're just talking about constipation and the difficulties that can happen with poo. So, and we said earlier that it can go from our normal sort of rectum size to an impacted rectum, and that's what we're showing here in our pictures. So the only way to help with this poo is to do what's called a disimpaction regime, and what we mean is to clear out the bowel, and by doing that we need to use what's called a macrogol medication. So we're either looking at Movicol, pediatric plain, so we're looking at Movicol, or we're looking at Lexido, which are both the same sort of form of medication. They're both macrogol medications. And what we actually do, what that actually is, is it's actually putting water in the large bowel. So we said earlier that as the poo moves around, water is absorbed. So what the medication does is it puts water in the large bowel. So then what you need to increase the dosages of the medication. So it's a bit like you dissolve it into water, and on the ERIC website you've got there we go, how to prepare macrogol medication. So on there it tells you that it's 62.5, which is 63 mils of water, just a very tiny amount of water that you mix it in with. And it's vital that you have that medication mixed with that amount of water, because that goes straight here. You can then mix it with whatever you like, squash, juice, fromage frais, jellies, yogurts, whatever it is, but as long as you mixed it in with the water first, because that water goes direct here. You then increase the sachets as a disimpaction regime, and then on the ERIC website you've got a parent's guide to disimpaction. So it just explains that it can go from 4 right up to 12 sachets, and all that is just putting water here. So it's almost like I describe it a bit like a water flume. So you've got the poo in here and you try to put lots of water to flush that out. And then once that's all clear and you achieve rusty water for a minimum of 24 hours, then you can dose. And once you do a maintenance dose, you are basically reducing that medication so that you then ensure that the constipation doesn't come back. And the key thing really is that you have the maintenance dose, because years ago we used to think that you once you've done this impaction, that the rectum just goes straight back to normal and then you can poo as normal again. But we now know it takes months to a year for the rectum to come back to normal. So if you've had that disimpaction regime, you need to make sure that you've got that maintenance dose to get that muscles to come back slowly. So it's not going to come back overnight. And then you don't want the constipation to come back again, because then you'll need to do it. So further information can be found on the ERIC website. So just look at disimpaction regime. So if you have any concerns, the first thing you need to do, if you're not sure about what your child's poo or wee is, then I would say do the bladder and bowel assessment chart, because then it gives you a clear picture for 14 days. And then you know exactly what's happening. And then you know that any program that you put in for the toileting will be successful, because you then know that they're not constipated. Because if you try and toilet train or potty train your child and there is it won't work. It won't be successful. And you know, you'll continue to have accidents because they won't be able to control passing. They won't know that they need to poo, and they won't know that they need to wee, because the poo is pushing on the wee. So this is why it's vital to have this as patients. So we mentioned that the foundations of successful poo and wee is having successful poo and wee is the foundations for being successful with our potty and toilet training. I do apologise, I'm having mixed up with my words today. So we need to make sure that we've got healthy poo, and we've mentioned about how we can do that. So the other thing that I didn't mention is that the other key thing to do is to drink. That is our key thing to do, and we'll mention it again when we're talking about our wee. So doing that, we need to make sure that we actually drink between 6 and 8 cups. So just to sort of clarify, so for you and I as adults, we would be having sort of 6 to 8 cups of water based fluids like that. So that's sort of like 250, 300 mils a cup. When you have a small child, the only difference is that you still need 6 to 8. It would be the size. So it would be a really, really, you know, a lot smaller. The older they get, sort of like half the cup, until, you know, more sort of like 10, 11, teenage, it can be back up to that sort of cup. But the key is to have it evenly spread out the whole day, because again, it's about the fluid and to move that poo. So the key is to have 6 to 8 cups of fluids across the whole day. So looking at healthy wee. So where does wee actually come from? So I've just got this picture here for you to be able to, so I'm just going to take these poos off while you're just looking at that. So you've got your picture of here to see where wee actually comes from. So this is where the kidney and the bladder is actually situated on the body. So we mentioned previously that sits just about here, so hopefully you can still see that. So the urinary system is actually made up of 2 kidneys, which are here, and they then go down. We have 2 ureters, so you can just say 2 tubes, it doesn't matter about the names, 2 tubes, and they go into the bladder here, and then you've got the urethra, which is this bit here. So if I come out of there so you can see me, hello, back again. So with regards to how this actually works, 2 kidneys, and the role of the kidneys is a bit like our intestines. It's about filtering out the blood. So it's about taking this out of the body and spreading it all around our body. So that's all the goodness. That's what's make us big and strong and helps us function on a daily basis. So all the goodness is filtered out through the kidneys. And then you're left with a waste, which is urine. So the wee then trickles these two tubes called ureters into the bladder throughout the day, and we don't have any control about that at all, into the bladder, which is here. So once it reaches the bladder, this is almost like our wee warehouse. So this is actually where the wee is stored. And then what happens is once the bladder is full, it then stretches, and as with our rectum, that stretching sends a message to the brain, comes back and says, we need to wee. So then what happens is the muscles squeeze and squeeze and keep squeezing. All the wee has gone. So that's actually how we actually wee. So there's actually two sets of muscles, but where? Oh, no. We've got one muscle, which is the bladder, which is a holding on muscle. So it's, sorry, that's the stretching muscle. And then you've also got here, which is like the holding on. So I've explained that. I'm not very good at blowing balloons, so please excuse me. So if we could imagine that this is our balloon, it's now full. So as you can see, it's stretched. But if we didn't have our holding on muscle, sorry, that's just kind of blown away over there. I do apologise. Sorry, if you don't have the holding on muscles, then what will happen is the wee will just constantly come out. Or in my case, the balloon will blow over there. So what we need is we need the stretchy, squeezy muscles, and we need the holding on muscles, because we need to be able to hold the wee in place. So because we've got these two sets of muscles, like with any muscles in our body, so, you know, if we wanted to keep fit, we'll go and, you know, we might go for a walk, or we might go for a run or a bike ride, or, you know, a jog, you know, whatever it is, we do some sort of exercise to keep our muscles fit. And we need to do the same with our bladder. We need to keep our bladder fit. But how do we actually do that? So what we actually need to do is we need to stretch the bladder and empty. So we need to fill and empty, fill and empty. But how can we do that? So how we can actually do that is by drinking. So we need to drink, as we mentioned, 8 cups of water-based fluids across the whole day. And by doing that, we're actually filling and emptying, filling and... The other thing we need to do, especially when we're coming to potty and toilet training, we need to make sure that we don't empty and empty and empty, because we need to make sure it fills first. So we don't want to be training every half hour. We don't want to be potty training every 40 minutes. We don't want to be potty training every hour. What we need to be doing is potty training every 20 to 30 minutes after your child is eaten and had something to drink. Because what we want that bladder to be full. And we want your child to recognise that signal of being full. And that's what they need to do. If potty train every half hour, every 40 minutes, what's actually happening is only half or a quarter of the bladder is actually filled. And they're not actually going to recognise those signals. And what can actually happen is that actually can lead to difficulties in later life, where you're constant, you know, you don't recognise those signals. The other thing that we need to look at is actually the types of drinks that we need to look at as well. So there's actually some fluids that can aggravate the bladder. So it can make it really, really full when actually it isn't. So we need to not make sure we're drinking our water-based fluids. And obviously appreciate that some children actually like water just on its own. So what you need to look at is, we're not saying, you know, no, they can't have squash. What we're saying is looking at the types of squash, pale colour squash. If you have the darker colour squash, it's actually got caffeine in it and it aggravates. So it actually acts like the bladder full when it isn't. And so that, again, doesn't help your child. So you're looking at the pale sort of fluids that they can have. Also reducing the caffeine contents as well. So when we're actually looking at this, when a child is a baby up until around the age of 18 months, this will stretch when it's full, send the message to the brain and automatically come back and relax and squeeze and then pass away. When a child reaches about 18 months to 3 years, what happens is this will fill with wee. It sends a message to the brain and it's almost like pressing pause. So it's like, and that's the only involuntary muscle that we have in our body. So it's like we're pressing pause and saying, okay, I need to go for a wee. I haven't got time to go for a wee now, or yes, I'm going to go for a wee. If it's you or I, it could be, oh, I've got to get the shopping in. I'm just going to hold in and then I'm going to go for a wee. So we actually hold on to that. And that sort of happens from the age of 18 months to 3 years. Then you can press play and then you're able to pass a wee. So it's just sort of that voluntary, the only voluntary control that we actually have. So what we need to look at is how we actually, just going to go back to our screen here, how we can actually relax on the toilet. So how can we actually do that? Because that's what we want our children to do, to actually relax, to then party. So once they've realised they've got that message, they need to relax rather than holding and tensing and making sure you can't pass it. We want them to be able to pass it. So the first thing to do is to be able to drink 6 to 8 cups of fluid across the whole day. So what we're looking at is water would be great, or really, really well diluted fruit juice. So it could be that, you know, your child likes a lot of juice to begin with, and you just over time gradually reduce the amount of juice that they actually have. If they wake in the night for a drink, we're looking at just water rather than juice. Trying to avoid any caffeine type drinks as well, because what caffeine does, it aggravates the bladder and then makes them want to pass away or feel like it's full when actually it isn't. We make sure that they're not passing every 20 to 30 minutes, what we said earlier. We need to make sure that they're relaxed and that they feel safe. So if you're on the potty, making sure that their feet are flat on the ground. If you're going to the toilet, it's making sure that they've got a toilet insert. They've got something to hold on. Some of the toilet inserts have got like little handles next to it. Maybe if they're only like little or diddy, you can have like the toilet steps that can go up, and then they can sit, and then their knees can be above their hips. We need to make sure that it's warm enough in the bathroom. A lot of bathrooms, it's like the coldest place in the house. So, you know, you've also got to make sure that it's impairing your child. So, you know, making sure that there's things for them to do. I always talk about toilet toys. So it's just sort of having a bag or a basket in a washable sort of drawstring, this type of, you know, like drawstring, so you can just get out the toys, what you're going to have, and it's just sort of making sure that you have some toys that are available just for the toilet. So they're sort of things, and also it's making sure that you stay with your child. You know, that it's just sort of like it's almost like, oh, come on, let's go. We introduce toilet time. Would you like to go to the toilet? Because we've already said that they need to learn those signals. They need to learn when they need a wee, and they need to learn when they need to go. So they don't actually know. So what we need to do to help our children's wee and poo, we need to make sure we say it's toilet time or it's potty time. We want to take out asking, because do you need to go to the toilet? No. And then 5 minutes later, they have an accident. They didn't know that they needed to go. And it could be the constipation again. They won't know that they need to go. So to help with that, it's just having a regular time of going for a wee or a poo. So I've just done a very, very quick overview of how to be successful with our potty and toilet training, looking at how the starting point really and the foundations, which is wee and poo. So saying that to be successful with our potty and toilet training, we need to have healthy poo and healthy wee. So that's how we need to sort of help. Obviously, there's lots of other things that we're going to we can discuss. I actually do full days about poo, days about wee. So obviously we just had a short amount of time today, that I just wanted to introduce you to that. So the key is that there's lots of different on the ERIC website. So please, go and have a look at the ERIC website. There's lots of information. There's leaflets. If you or your nursery or your family will sort of think, oh, I really would like that, go onto the website. You can download the leaflet. You can also request for some leaflets to be delivered as well. So you can actually give them out to families if it's like your staff. But as a family, you can also just print it off yourself, and then you can have those. And there's lots of different leaflets to help you. So we've got our thinking about two, being successful with looking at bladder problems. We've also got bladder problems and bowel problems. We've also got the potty training, the leaflet, a step-by-step guide of all the different things that you can do to help your child with their potty and toilet training. So it's actually looking at that. So that would be great to sort of look at that. I'm also going to be delivering some training with the nursery. So please, put your name down, come along and see me with that. But I'm live question and answer once I've finished with this as well. So if you've got any questions, then please feel free to message me with those questions. The only other thing to sort of say is to sort of keep in touch. So if you do have any concerns, then please pop a question along to the question and answer. I'm more than happy. Or you can contact me as a continence sleep and behaviour consultant via ERIC. We've got the helpline here, the numbers. You've also got, you can email, you've got Health Unlocked. And if after today you just sort of think, yeah, do you know what? I know that my child is okay, wee and poo, I've got no concerns about that. Or print off the bladder and bowel assessment chart just to make sure that you're all okay. And then you want to start with the potty training. And then you can have a look at the Let's Go Potty on the Instagram page. So you can just sort of, as you're going through that, you've then got the support there from other families as well as Eric and ourselves as trainers as well. So thank you so much for listening. I'm just going to stop this page now. So thank you so much for listening. It's been brilliant to meet you all virtually, and hopefully you'll all pop along and we'll be able to do the classes. So please, if you've got any questions, please come along and I'll be happy to answer. I'll speak to you soon. Thanks so much.